I urge young people to look at the laws that are being passed by our legislators. Because right now, we have a law, it's the Revised Code of Washington, 9A. Hold on, let me get it real quick. Here in Washington, homicide by other person when justifiable. When does a homicide ever become justifiable? And this is another version of the Stand Your Ground law. And so I'm gonna read it to you real quick. It said, homicide is also justifiable when committed either in the lawful defense of the slayer or his husband, wife, parent, child, brother or sister, or any other person in his or her presence or company when there is reasonable ground to apprehend a design on the part of the person, and there is imminent danger of such design being accomplished, or in the actual resistance of an attempt to commit a felon upon the slayer in his or her presence, or upon in a dwelling or other place of abode in which he or she is. I'm going to ask Mr. Bible, James Bible, to come up real quick to that the homicide was justifiable without any reasoning or anything.
All right.
My name is James Bible. I'm president of Seattle King County branch of the NAACP and legal redress for the NAACP state conferences for Alaska, Oregon, and Washington.
All right.
Now, the law in Florida that we've come to know as Stand Your Ground fully articulates that there is really just that. You must stand your ground, or you can stand your ground in the event that you are attacked. Now, in the state of Washington, we heard the law, but our law is not necessarily as clear, but I'll tell you what happens in a courtroom in terms of self-defense. What we have is no duty to retreat, which basically means stand your ground. But I don't want you today to be concerned or confused about the law, because the law of self-defense may be in place, but its application is what is incorrect at this moment in time. It is the application of this particular law, and they want us to get busy debating the law and whether or not it's right or wrong, so that we forget the individual and institutional actions that seem to be present in Florida, in Washington, in Texas, in Massachusetts, in you name it, throughout the United States of America.
Right.
The application of the law is what we should be questioning. The reality is that people of color rarely ever get to use what's traditionally been termed as self-defense. And that's not only true in Sanford, Florida, where a young man was faced with somebody that had a gun pointing it at him. It's also true in Seattle, Washington. It's also true in New York City. It's also true throughout this country. And it's been true ever since we were called 3/5 of a human being. We've all heard that saying, the more things change, the more they say the same. And that's applicable today, because what we can tell you is that people are lynched in the United States of America. And it is not only Trayvon Martin. It is not only Trayvon Martin. Some of you know the name of Lamont Harmon. Lamont Harmon walking to a store in Sacramento 2 weeks before Trayvon Martin. Officers come up, think that he's a car thief, but they are wrong. He's unarmed and he is shot and he is killed. Moving on to Chicago, there's a young man. A young man who accidentally dialed 911. We know how cell phones sometimes work. And rather than coming to his aid or responding in concern, they shot that unarmed human being down. Execution. And it goes on, and it goes on, and it goes on. The name Trayvon Martin is transforming. He belonged to his immediate family, and I'm sure that they would tell you today that they would prefer not to see his name in Wikipedia for what happened. They would prefer that he were in their home, that he was preparing for prom, that he was thinking about college, that they were talking about what his children would someday look like. But that time has come and passed. So Trayvon Martin's name sparks this movement. It sparks this movement not only for Trayvon and his family, but for those that have been executed and forgotten. It reminds us all that in this nation, an innocent man in the heart of Georgia was executed. His name was Troy Davis. Say it with me. His name was Troy Davis. His name was Troy Davis. And what did they know? They knew that it was unlikely that he committed the murder that they claim he did. Now, I only wish that he got the same sort of deference that Mr. Zimmerman is getting now. I wish that before the execution and before even the charging, they had tested the evidence in Mr. Davis's case the way they have sought to circumvent every issue in Zimmerman's case. We hear now from his attorneys that perhaps he had shaken baby syndrome or something similar. Can we imagine that?
Can't imagine.
We can't imagine that. We can't imagine it because it's real. Because that's what they're actually saying. And they expect us to buy this. They expect us to believe this. They expect us to just simply say, okay, that must have been the case. Poor Mr. Zimmerman, armed with a gun, chasing people with Skittles, must have needed to defend himself. Himself. This is a reality in our system everywhere. Now, I want to be clear. I want to be crystal clear. When we say that this is a movement, when we say that things are transforming, we're saying that things are only just beginning. We must unpack the institutional inequities that are present in our society. We must not ever back down, never back down. We must acknowledge that at this stage, whole segments of this population no longer have their right to vote. We must acknowledge that at this stage, disenfranchised populations have no choice but to march in the streets and demand justice by a system or with a system that consistently ignores them. Except for when we're called frightening. Except for when we're shot down. This is a transformative moment. There are moments in time that shock a nation's conscience, where the mothers of families, they fall down to their knees in such pain, when brothers and sisters look at each other and understand that things will never be the same. This is one of those moments. This is one of those times. And we talk about the different names. We've spoken of Emmett Till. We've talked about Trayvon Martin. And in between that, there are so very many more that are lynched and have been lynched in the United States of America. We will not stop. We will not back down. Prepare for marches all summer. Prepare for events all summer. Prepare to make our voices known. Prepare to see us at legislatures from Seattle to Olympia to every capital in every state and to Washington, D.C. as well. Change is going to come. The Constitution applies to all. Arrest, convict Mr. Zimmerman. But even after that's done, it's still not enough. Stand strong on your Constitution. We are no longer considered 3/5 of a human being. Demand your human rights and your humanity.